What's up, YouTube? My name is Ghrei, and you may be familiar with this series, the COG series. And as you probably know, if you've listened to them before, there have been a lot of voice actors that have helped me out with the series. Now, while this is obviously amazing and really fun to do, based on my current situation, I'm juggling so much that I want to get this out consistently. And I just cannot do that with all of the voice actors. So, for the time being, I will be recording the audio for all of this story myself. So it should be either a weekly or bi-weekly thing, depending on how long it takes me to write out a lot of chapters. After this one, I might go on a couple weeks break, just so that I can pile up a couple of chapters in advance, so I can make it more frequent than I otherwise would. I'm just letting you guys know what's going on. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you haven't watched the other chapters, especially the prologue, please do that before you watch this video. And without further ado, enjoy! Olga could feel her heartbeat climbing up her throat as her mind began overclocking itself. The impending danger presented by the newcomer's connections weaved its way deep into her psyche. The turmoil eased ever so slightly, however, as she noted the excitement within Noelle. It was palpable as she inspected Cog, eyes glistening. It's incredible! It talks! It seems like it can think! Its behavior is enigmatic, at least compared to a typical peck, and it's got a name! It's a miracle, a blessing, and Foster! Noelle's voice abruptly caught in her throat. The only thing more potent in the room than the tension was the sudden silence. Somebody had to speak, to interrupt the deafening quiet enveloping them. Eventually, much to the relief of Olga, the Founder's assistant stood. Foster wants him. Founder Foster wants that peck, and you lied to him. We need to fix this, to show him this anomaly, apologize for— No, we're not telling him about Cog. You can and you will. I won't and I won't. I do not trust that man in the slightest. The only thing he'd even want with Cog would be to turn him into some living battery or some sort of Sebe experiment. He would definitely turn him over for a profit in the blink of an eye. Noelle's gaze fell upon Cog, who was looking away, holding himself, before turning back to Olga with a steely stare, her voice lowering itself to just above a whisper. He will find out. It doesn't matter if you tell him, or if I do, or if someone 3 years from now who happens to catch a passing glance at the peck does. In fact, odds are, nobody has to tell him. He isn't just some rich, powerful businessman, Olga. This is Hugo Foster. He's ranked at the top of nearly every conceivable scoreboard. And while it's true that includes money and power, it also includes intellect, physical prowess, observational skills, everything. This is the worst idea I have heard in a long time. We are going to tell him. Not because of some immoral, praise be the wealthy excuse. We are going to tell him so we don't get ourselves skinned alive. The room was, once again, consumed by silence, Noelle rubbing her temples while shifting uncomfortably. Braun's voice awoke first. So you're saying you don't want to tell Foster, right? What? No, that isn't— You feel like you have to, but that doesn't mean you want to. Braun's grin grew wide as he chuckled softly. You're curious about Cog just like Olga is, aren't you? At this accusation, Noelle turned away once again before responding. So what if I am? It doesn't change the fact that— Noelle, it changes every fact. You want to keep this lie going, I know it. You're just afraid of the repercussions. Noelle remained silent. Olga stood, resting a hand atop her shoulder in a vain attempt to comfort the newcomer. So you're loyal out of fear, are you? Well, this can go one of two ways. You've seen the secret we've been keeping, and you're in the same boat as me. You want to learn more about Cog, so you can either run back to Foster like a loyal hound and spew all of our information at him, or— Olga grinned, crossing her arms. You can stay with us, learn about this little guy, and not snitch on us. Keep this lie going for just long enough to figure out what we have to about this peck, then take steps from there.
I am afraid of Foster, but there's a different reason that takes precedence.
Excuse me?
I said I'm not only afraid of him. I respect him, his presence, his charisma. He's everything I aspire to be.
At this, Olga blanched.
Well, we can't just let you leave here now that you have this information. Listen, there's a possibility that I don't run back to Founder Foster. A possible future where I linger around and keep you all under the radar.
Noelle turned to stare down Olga, eyes cold and unflinching. The sudden shift in expression surprised the latter, who straightened abruptly.
There's also one where I transcribe every individual detail for him so vividly he couldn't get a better view of the scene if he were standing right here, right now. Face the facts. You have nothing I desire, and clearly you're in desperate need of help. For the time being, I could remain quiet, but that would mean I'd be a part of this. In such an event, you would all listen to what I say. If you would so much as hesitate to do as you are told, I would have proper documentation of these events filed and sent to Foster within moments of your insubordination.
Olga sat in flustered contemplation. Her mind kicked into overdrive, roiling with possibilities both grandiose and gruesome. Orville finally spoke after what felt like hours.
And these orders will be reasonable, correct? They won't put us or anyone else into harm's way?
He inquired, brow furrowed.
Of course, if I can help it. Though even if I do have to give the command to hurt someone, you will follow through. It's all about cooperation. You respect my terms, and I'll likely feel more inclined to keep Foster off your scent.
Olga glanced at Braun, who nodded sharply. As she turned her gaze back on Noelle for a split second, she could have sworn the newcomer was sneaking another glance at Cog out of the corner of her eyes. Olga heaved an exasperated sigh.
Let's assume we agree and you do keep quiet. How do we know we can rely on you? How do we know this will actually be beneficial for us?
Noelle crossed her arms, expressionless.
You don't? You have no clue if I'll do what I say. Could be a monkey's paw for all you know.
An opaque white strand of vapor trailed from behind her, weaving its way into her bag before recoiling moments later. Held in its gaseous grip was a large satchel, and the muffled jingling of coins resounded as the leather pouch hit the counter.
Assuming you want my help, I'll give you lot 50,000 pieces each to get you started. Should make it easier to work with the situation you're in.
With a wave of her hand, the steam dissipated, dropping the sack which landed atop the bookstore's counter with a resounding and satisfying thud.
If you don't want to chase the hypothetical I've laid out, don't. However, it's the only good option you currently have that avoids direct confrontation with Foster. And I'd say it's a relatively good one.
She stuck out her hand to Olga, who simply stared, dumbfounded.
Do we have a compromise?
She cooed. Braun and Orville led the group of 5 down a cobbled path, Olga and Noelle keeping an eye on the heavy satchel on Braun's back. Subtle rustling from within had bent to the topmost flap. A small gap betrayed solid navy blue eyes peeking lazily from inside, before retreating cautiously, movement slowing to a halt. This ushered forth a small grin from Olga, recalling the nocturnal nature of her ally resting within. The sudden, punctuated voice of Orville dragged her back into the moment. Attentiveness redoubled.
I cannot repeat this enough. I'm not going to leave with you when you inevitably go on the move with Cog. I may be in on this, but I'm not forfeiting everything I've done. Yeah, we've heard you the first dozen times, Orville. You can stay behind at your new jewelry store and forget all about this. We just need your skills here, like I've said a dozen times now.
Orville huffed, shaking his head.
I still don't get why you want my help. You're perfectly capable of finding toddler's clothing on your own.
Sure, but you know where to find something that won't make him seem like a really bizarre-looking kid. Glancing at Orville's distraught face, he continued. Aw, come on, friend. Soon as we get this, we'll bring you right back to the shopping center. You'll be able to live like none of this ever happened. Olga and Noelle exchanged skeptical glances. No sooner than Braun had spoken did their destination come into view. a ragged trail leading to an ever-nearing marketplace. The buildings huddled together within the confines of the natural rocky outcroppings enveloping the locale. The few customers able to find this place were exploring the various stores, securing recently purchased shimmering gemstones and freshly sewn garments in their handmade satchels. A vast majority of the knapsacks were crafted from worn leather and thick rope. Braun began rolling his arms and shoulders consistently as the minute archway passed overhead, signaling the midway point of the day's travels. "You know, Cog, I like you, but you're pretty damn heavy to carry in a backpack like this." Cog replied with nothing more than a quiet grunt and slightly more rustling. Braun let out a booming chuckle, which fell short after observing Orville's continued dismay.
Let's just get this done, all right?
Braun briskly nodded, heaving a sigh. "All right, Orville, where to? I don't know this Ashtari place very well."
"It's just over there,"
he muttered in a surge of excitement, gesturing to an overgrown, decrepit building whose brickwork and yard were laden with dandelions and honeysuckle.
"I've known Sullivan for ages, since I got into the clerking business. He's well known for tailor-making clothes within a few hours. He's as friendly as he is skilled, and he makes some of the best garments around. We just give him the measurements for Cog, and then we wait."
Olga noticed him glancing back, and seeing their faces, he hurriedly continued.
"He may not keep his property in the greatest condition, but his quality is unmatched. I can guarantee you that."
He led the group into the lackluster storefront, and almost immediately the dismay turned to awe as the newcomers gawked at the countless varieties of fabrics and threads lining shelves which themselves practically covered the mahogany walls. Pre-made garments hung in shockingly neat fashion behind the counter, each labeled with a small tag clipped onto the collar or waistband of each individual piece. The countertop before them went wall to wall, its marble finish glistening in the noontide sun. Measuring implements and notes sprawled across its surface. In their stunned silence, they could all hear some mumbling from behind a violet curtain just past the backmost wall. Orville grinned broadly, eyes sparkling.
"Say, it's me, Orville! How have you been, Sullivan?"
In a flash of movement that startled Olga, a lanky man with slate-gray skin burst from behind the curtain with an ear-to-ear smile. His gaze rested on Orville's form as his silver eyes glimmered with childlike excitement. Despite his obviously graying hair and crooked posture, he leapt spryly over the counter to give his acquaintance a massive hug, and as he spoke, his curiously loud voice carried throughout the shop.
"Oh, my boy! It's been far, far too long! Goodness, how I've missed you all!"
After a prolonged moment, Sullivan released Orville from the spirited greeting, still grinning broadly.
"I've been A-okay, my boy. Business has been booming as of late, what with the new wave of fashion coming around. I'm sure your own shop has seen some relatively large growth, too."
Turning to face the others, Sullivan blinked.
Who are these fine folks with you, Orv? New acquaintances of yours?"
"Oh, indeed. Meet Braun, the big one, Olga, the one with black hair, and Noel, the fancy redhead." Gesturing to each one in turn, Orville's smile grew by the minute. Olga stepped forward.
"Pleased to meet you, Sullivan. We have a request of you, and time is of the essence."
The Fabrician tilted his head.
"Why, whatever is this for? A special event?"
Braun nodded.
"I suppose you could say that. Noelle here has the specifications for you."
On cue, she passed Sullivan a neatly written sheet of paper, giving him a small smile.
"I do sincerely hope that it's specific enough. I know next to nothing about custom clothing, but I added in every measurement I could conceive of at the time. I'd think that would be enough. Unfortunately, the individual who this is for can't be a model for you today." "Not to worry, my dear. These are so specific I could make a life-size replica of the lad, right down to the hair on his chest."
Heartily chuckling, Sullivan strode behind the counter again, this time using the hinged portion of the counter to return to his workstation.
Feel free to make yourselves at home. Look around the market, take a nap on one of the plush stitchworks, or just chat amongst yourselves. I should have this fine piece done within 3 hours. No, make that 2 hours with this much information.
Olga soon found herself smiling. Her heart went out to the old man. He had such a strong passion for his craft that she couldn't help but become intoxicated by his joy. Despite the rush of delight, however, a familiar pain had begun to creep into her chest, one which grew with every passing moment she spent thinking about the shopkeeper's pure jubilance. Noting that Braun had begun meditating while Noelle and Orville had started discussing droll business jargon, Olga opted to step outside. Once she had passed the threshold, a miasma of weariness crept into her mind. Each footfall further lulled her consciousness, causing her perceptions to shift uncomfortably. Unable to identify the exact issue, she shuffled along aimlessly. A particularly chilling breeze grazed her neck, causing the girl to shiver. Snowflakes began to pepper the sky above her as she wrapped herself in her own arms, the precipitation only growing in strength. She glanced behind her before freezing in place, guts searing and eyes burning. Her mind blazed, rapidly flickering through memories, as the door of a sizable yet decrepit cabin stood before her. The door frame was hardly holding itself together, roof above the entrance fully torn off. A vast majority of the building was exposed to the nature surrounding it. Every shop had become a boulder, every stand replaced by a spruce or pine. The light shattering that had squeezed its way into her mind prior was no longer present, and a second blistering wind urged her into the house. The weather was no less brutal within the confines of the walls. She roamed the hallways of the cabin, attempting to find warmth and proper shelter, but no solution presented itself. Eventually, she came across a door, arched and splintered, but still intact. From a window, Olga could see a collapsed wall, providing a slanted roof for this particular space. She pried at the doorknob, each second spent trying to open it, stretching into an eternity. Finally, the entry gave way, allowing her access to a sight she'd all but forgotten. Within the room lay a single bed, atop which rested a young girl, no more than 9 years old. Her skin was quite pale, hair raven black and body entangled with blankets and ragged cloth. Her breathing was shallow, eyes laced with rheum and face stained by tears. One eye was swollen and pink, a bright violet iris barely peeking through. Her other eye was closed tightly, as though she were trying to make herself sleep. Every so often the girl's body would tense, nearly spasming, before slowly relaxing again. The walls around the bed were laced with mucus and blood, the smell of stale feces and rot seeping into Olga's nose. A single book, marred with scorch marks and frayed pages, rested atop the fluid-speckled dresser beside the young girl's bed. The floor beside it was laden with small amounts of vomit and excrement, dried to the musty carpet. Olga instinctively held a hand to her heart, eyes beginning to water. The feeling of the fabric within her hands brought about a recollection like an avalanche within her mind, one which formed into the silhouette of a fabrician. Why didn't anyone help her? Why did she never have what Sullivan could offer Orville? What did she do wrong? Why did everyone go away? It was then that Olga felt an abrupt pain in her shoulder, sending her crashing back to reality.